This happened a few months ago. I was 32 and working as a medical intern at a busy hospital. I was covering for a colleague who called in sick. I remember feeling exhausted but also eager to help out. The hospital was large and sterile. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The long corridors stretched on forever. I did my rounds, checking on patients, ensuring everything was in order. But I've never stopped thinking about what happened that night. After I finished checking on the occupied rooms, I stepped into an empty ward. It was eerily quiet. I flicked on the light. The room looked neat, but something felt off. Then I heard a whisper. I thought I must have just been hearing things. Maybe it was just the building settling. I shook it off and moved on. As I walked through the dim hallway, the whispers grew clearer. I stopped. I looked around, but there was no one there. My heart began to race. I told myself I was just tired. I couldn't let my imagination get the better of me. The lights flickered above me. I felt a cold draft sweep through the corridor. I shivered and kept walking. I wanted to believe it was nothing, just a trick of my tired mind. But the voices kept coming, echoing from the empty rooms. I kept telling myself, "You're just tired, Jamie." I'm not sure why I didn't leave. An hour passed. The voices now sounded like a conversation, but I couldn't make out any words. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, but every time I turned to look, there was nothing. I felt as if I was being watched. My stomach churned. I could hear the faint beeping of machines and the rustling of paper in the nurse's station, but I only focused on those whispers. I headed to the break room. The door creaked as I opened it. The chill returned, the lights flickered more insistently. My breath quickened. I called out, hoping to break the silence. "Is anyone there?" My voice echoed back at me, unanswered. Then I heard it, a voice that sounded almost like my own. "Jamie." I froze. I didn't know where it was coming from. Before I could react, I heard the sound of wheelchair wheels rolling behind me. I whipped around, and there was nothing there. My heart raced. I felt dizzy. I had to leave, but I was frozen in place. Finally, with the clock ticking down my shift, I gathered myself and moved toward the exit. I felt the whispers rising behind me, almost urging me to turn back. But I kept going, stepping out into the cool night air, plagued by the need for answers. What were those voices? Now, every time I'm alone, I wonder if I really left the hospital behind me that night. The whispers still linger in my mind. I can't escape them. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. It was as if the whispers had been waiting for me. I walked into the hospital, my heart heavy. The corridors felt different. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but I knew the truth. That evening, I went to my regular shift. I forced myself to focus on the patients. I checked on the older man in room 203, who always had a smile. But even as I laughed with him, the whispers circled in my mind. I decided I needed answers. After my shift, I made my way to the empty ward from the night before. The air was still and heavy. I could hear my footsteps echoing as I walked, stabbing into the silence. I raised my shaky hand and flicked the light switch. The bulb buzzed to life, illuminating the room. The faint hum of the overhead light reminded me of the chaos outside. I stood there for a moment, looking around. The ward felt both familiar and foreign. My breath caught in my throat as I heard it again. The whisper, clearer this time. "Jamie." Panic flooded me. I wanted to run. Instead, I steeled myself. "Who are you?" I called into the darkness. Silence followed, stretching out longer than I could bear. I turned to leave, but then I noticed something on the floor. An old patient file, dusty and pushed against the wall. My pulse quickened. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The name on the cover was faded, but I could make out the letters, Monsieur Thompson. That name sounded familiar. I flipped through the pages, flipping quickly until I found a photograph. It was a woman with dark hair and warm eyes. I must have seen her during my rounds, but it was more than that. A wave of recognition hit me. Suddenly, the whispers became clearer. "Help me, Jamie." The chilling realization gripped me. These voices belonged to patients, those who had suffered alone, and now they needed someone to hear them. But why me? I felt the weight of their pain sink into me, almost suffocating. I put the file down as I backed away. I needed to escape, but the shadows moved and I caught a glimpse of someone standing at the end of the hall, a figure in white. My breath hitched. I reached for my phone, but before I could pull it out, the lights flickered. "Do you remember me?" the figure said, its voice piercing the air like a knife. The fear washed over me, paralyzing my body as I stared at the figure's deep, dark eyes. It closed the distance between us, but I couldn't move. All I could think was how deeply I had underestimated those whispers. Then everything went dark. The lights went out, plunging me into an icy silence. Panic coursed through me as I heard a laugh echo off the walls, a cruel, haunting sound cutting through the stillness. I staggered back, feeling around for the exit. I had to find a way out, but as I turned, I heard their voices again. "Help us, Jamie. Help us." I froze, caught in a grip of fear. I was not alone. That realization sent waves of adrenaline rushing through me. I had to find a way to escape, but I also knew I couldn't ignore them any longer. I stood there in the dark, heart racing, caught between the whispers and the figure that haunted my thoughts. I could hardly breathe. A chill crawled up my spine, and the darkness felt alive around me. I had to get out, but the path to the door wasn't clear anymore. As I steadied myself, the laughter echoed again. It lingered in the corners of my mind, sending shivers down my arms. "Help us, Jamie." The voices surged, desperate and pleading. I forced my eyes to adjust to the darkness, hoping to find a hint of light or a way out. I could almost hear the shadows shifting, closing in, surrounded by their unearthly calls. Then I remembered my phone. I fumbled through my pockets, my fingers finally grasping the familiar weight. The screen felt like a beacon as I clicked it on. The blue light sliced through the darkness, illuminating the stark, empty room, but I realized too late that moving toward the exit meant wandering deeper into the shadows. "Please," I murmured, even as the echoes surrounded me like a thick fog. "I can't help you if you don't show me what you need." Almost as if my words stirred something, the laughter stopped, replaced by a shuddering silence that made my skin crawl. I took a hesitant step forward. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement in the far corner, a shadow shifting just out of reach of my light. I raised my phone, trying to sharpen my focus. "Is someone there?" I called, my voice trembling. Silence fell again, thick and suffocating. At that moment, the lights buzzed back to life, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. My heart lurched at the sudden brightness. I squinted against it, vision adjusting, when I finally saw her, M. Thompson, the woman from the photograph. She stood before me, her expression a mix of sorrow and urgency. "You have to find the others, Jamie." I blinked, my mind racing. "There are others?" "Yes." Her voice was shaky, but her presence felt oddly calming. "They're trapped. They need your help to be heard." "What do I do?" I was desperate for answers, but even I knew this felt wrong. Without warning, she pushed a stack of files into my hands. My heart sank. They were more patient files, each one covered in dust. "Find the truth, Jamie. They can't move on until you do." And just like that, as abruptly as she had appeared, she vanished. I stood alone again, clutching the files, my breath accelerating as the weight of my task settled on my shoulders. I needed to know what was hidden inside these pages. But then I heard it again, a rustling, a whisper more frantic this time. "Help us, Jamie." Panic flooded my thoughts. I had to decide, confront the mystery or flee from the haunting voices. Before I could think twice, I bolted toward the door, clutching the files like a lifeline. A sudden crash from behind jolted me to a stop. I spun around, heart racing as the laughter returned, merging with the whispers into a horrifying chorus. I knew I had backed myself into a corner, and I wasn't sure how long I could resist what waited in the shadows. But there was no turning back now. I was in too deep, and every instinct screamed that I needed to uncover the truth before it consumed me. I burst through the doorway, my heart pounding against my ribcage like a trapped animal. The hallway was eerily quiet compared to the cacophony of voices that just moments ago surrounded me. Dim light flickered above, casting unsettling shadows that danced along the walls. I glanced back, half expecting to see Monsieur Thompson standing behind me, but the space was empty. I took a shaky breath and tried to steady my racing thoughts. The files felt heavy in my arms, a tangible reminder of my strange encounter. I had to know what secrets they held. But the voices still lingered in the back of my mind, tugging at my sanity. "Help us," their plea echoed in my ears, wrapping around me like a heavy mist. I rushed down the hallway, hardly daring to look over my shoulder. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, fueling my urgency. I reached a small waiting area lined with old, worn chairs. No one occupied them. The sight was unnervingly peaceful amidst my chaos. A chill crept over my skin. I dropped into one of the chairs and opened the first file. The papers were yellowed and brittle, the text smudged in places. I scanned through the details, each name feeling like another layer of a puzzle I was desperate to solve. The deeper I read, the more my heart sank. The patients described were never released, their stories filled with pain and loss. "What happened to you?" I whispered to myself, feeling like a voyeur peeking into someone else's tragedy. It didn't take long for the next file to tell a similar tale, one of neglect and despair. Names I didn't recognize, lives that seemed to flicker like dying embers. The connection felt tangible, as if their spirits were beckoning for recognition. Then I saw her name, Maggie Henson, there among the others. The date was recent, but the notes were troubling. Suicide attempt. But she's... My pulse quickened as I traced the words with my finger. It was about then I heard it. A soft shift beyond the waiting area, a whisper faint yet unmistakable. "Jamie." It was barely audible, yet the familiar tone swirled my insides. "Help us." I jerked up, eyes darting to where the sound originated. An open door at the end of the hall. My gut twisted. I wanted to bolt, to run away from the darkness hiding there, but I knew better. The urge to discover the truth pushed me forward, despite every instinct screaming to turn back. I approached the door, heart racing, every step laden with a growing dread. The hallway was closing in around me, walls pressing against my back. Shadows shifted just beyond the threshold. What awaited me in that opaque darkness? As I reached for the door handle, my breath caught. There was a rustling sound and then more whispers, now more urgent and intense. "Jamie, help!" I froze, caught between terror and curiosity. In that moment I realized that diving into this mystery might lead me to an answer, but it could also lead to my own undoing. All I had to do was open the door and step inside. But what would I find? The door creaked as I pushed it open, an eerie sound that seemed to echo in the stillness. My heart thudded in my chest as I stepped inside, the air growing colder. The room was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls like fingers reaching for something lost. I squinted into the darkness, searching for the source of the whispers. "Jamie." The voice was clearer now, tinged with desperation. My breath quickened. I didn't recognize it, but I felt an undeniable pull. I had to follow it. I moved cautiously, each step heightened by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The room was filled with old medical equipment, forgotten and covered in dust. It felt like a graveyard for lost hope. A single flickering bulb cast a pale light over the room, and I could see more files stacked haphazardly on a table. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, yet curiosity clenched my gut tighter. "Help us." The voice came again, this time accompanied by a low, raspy breathing that sent chills down my spine. I turned sharply, my eyes scanning the shadows. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling. Silence returned, stretching on like a taut string. But then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a movement. A figure emerged from the shadows, barely illuminated by the flickering light. My heart lurched as I struggled to make sense of what it could be. "Maggie," I whispered, the name escaping my lips without thought. The figure shifted, its features hidden, but I felt an inkling of recognition. Was it really her? "Jamie." The voice was clearer now, layered with sorrow. You have to help us. I didn't know how to respond. What happened to you? Where are you? My voice shook, but I pressed on. A part of me wanted to run, to escape whatever nightmare this was, but I was already too deeply entangled. The figure stepped closer, and the light caught glimpses of something, worn scrubs and eyes filled with unshed tears. They don't let us go. We're trapped. Panic constricted around my chest. Trapped? Who? What do you mean? Before she could answer, a loud crash shattered the tense air. A rolling cart tipped over in another part of the hospital, sending echoes filling the halls. My heart raced anew, dread pooling in my stomach. What was that? I asked, my eyes darting to the doorway. The whispers escalated to urgent pleas, voices overlapping, drowning each other out. Help! We need help! It's not safe! I turned back to the figure, but she was gone. The room pulsed with silence, the air electric with foreboding. My goal slipped further away as confusion gripped me. Then out of the corner of my eye, a glimmer caught my attention. I approached the table, heart racing. There, among the scattered files, I saw a small, leather-bound notebook. My fingertips grazed the cover, and with it came a rush of cold air, almost electric. That's when I saw it. A name on the inside cover I'd never expected to find. My breath hitched as the realization struck me. It wasn't just a name. It was the key to everything I didn't understand. But as I turned to leave, the whispers surged again, louder this time, filled with despair. Don't go, you can't leave us. And just like that, I knew I had stepped into something much darker than I ever could have imagined. I needed answers, but at what cost? I gripped the notebook tightly, my heart pounding against my ribs. The whispers grew frantic, echoing around me like a storm of voices demanding attention. I felt trapped, suffocated between the pull of the mysteries within the notebook and the fear of what lingered in the shadows. With shaking hands, I opened it. The pages were filled with what looked like notes and sketches, all centered around an older woman who seemed familiar, yet distant. A chill shot through me as I recognized her face in one of the sketches. It was my grandmother, a woman I hadn't thought about in years, long before sickness had taken her from us. Why are you here? I mumbled to myself, trying to make sense of it all. Why would her name be in this hospital? The scribble suggested that my grandmother had been involved in a medical trial. Something unusual. Jamie! The voice called out again, now filled with urgency. You need to listen. I slammed the notebook shut, adrenaline taking over. The urgency in her tone yanked me back to the present. I had to know what had happened to her, and to the others who were crying out for help. I needed to understand the danger. As I turned to leave, a sudden chill enveloped me. The air thickened, and I could feel it pressing against my skin. I glanced towards the door. It was blocked. Stacks of files, somehow materializing in front of me, now barred my exit. Let us go. The voices pleaded again, despair heavy in every word. I took a step back, panic rising with each breath. The temperature dropped further, and the shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls. Who are you? I shouted into the darkness, my fear igniting resentment. What do you want from me? An icy gust of wind seemed to answer as a thick mist slithered around my feet, surrounding me. I could glimpse fleeting figures within it, faces twisted in anguish. The whispers lingered, a cacophony of desperate pleas, all inviting me closer while pushing me away. No! I backed up against the table, grasping the edges hard enough to feel the splinters bite into my palms. I can't help you if you don't tell me what's going on. Silence engulfed the room. I felt a shift in energy, as if the very air held its breath. Then, as if a dam had broken, one face emerged from the fog, clearer than the others. It was the woman from the sketches, my grandmother, eyes wide with both sorrow and warning. Jamie. Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper. You must find the truth. Before I could respond, the lights flickered violently, casting the room into darkness. Heart racing, I fumbled to find my way, disoriented by the sudden change. A loud thud echoed nearby, followed by the sound of footsteps. Someone was in the hallway. My mind whirled with questions. Who could it be? Was I in danger? In that moment, the notebook slipped from my fingers, falling open to a page that glowed with an unnatural light. I leaned closer and words began to unravel before my eyes. They formed a warning. They are watching, don't trust them. At that moment I realized that this wasn't just about the past. Something malevolent lurked here, and I was trapped in its web. I had to act fast or I might become another voice lost to the darkness. The darkness was thick and heavy, wrapping around me like a shroud. I forced myself to breathe, every inhale shaky. If I was going to get out of this room, I needed to stay focused. The footsteps grew louder, echoing off the sterile walls. Whoever it was, they were getting closer. I searched frantically for a place to hide, but there was nowhere. The table and chair just loomed there. My only options were to cower behind them or freeze in place. I pressed myself against the wall, the chill of the tiles biting through my clothes. My heart drummed a wild beat in my chest as I held my breath, straining to make out any detail in the dark. The footsteps paused right outside the door. I braced myself, expecting a face to peer in, but the moment stretched endlessly. Then an unexpected sound broke the silence. A soft click, followed by the grinding of metal. The door slowly creaked open, and I realized the figure on the other side had no idea I was here. I ducked lower, heart racing. The shadow that emerged was indistinct, but the silhouette was too tall to be a nurse. It moved with purpose, stepping into the room, looking around as if searching for something. I held my breath, every instinct screaming to run, but fear rooted me in place. "Jamie." A hoarse whisper came from the figure. I recognized that voice. It was the same voice that had called out before, filled with urgency. "Who are you?" I whispered, the words almost choking me. "I'm here to help," the figure insisted, taking a step closer to the desk where the notebook lay. "You have to trust me." I squinted, trying to make out any features, but the darkness distorted everything. "What do you know?" I asked, desperate for answers. The figure hesitated, glancing back at the door. "You need to listen carefully. The trial, it wasn't for healing. It was for something else, just as they did with your grandmother." "Stop," I shouted, fueled by panic. "What happened to her? Tell me." A low groan echoed back from the doorway. The voice shifted, losing its urgency. "They're coming for you." Suddenly the lights flashed back on, flooding the room with blinding brightness. The figure staggered back, revealing a familiar face, one I'd only seen in photographs. It was my grandmother's sister, Aunt Clara, whose existence I'd nearly forgotten. Clara? I couldn't believe it. Relief and confusion crashed over me like a wave. But the moment was short-lived as I heard another noise, a heavy thud, followed by muffled shouts from the hallway. "The others," Aunt Clara cried, her voice filled with a deep urgency. "They know you're here. You have to stay hidden until I can get you out." "Others?" I blinked in shock, searching her face for answers. "Yes, you've walked into something much bigger than you know." And without warning, there was another thud, this one louder. Shadows shifted menacingly outside the door. As the voices grew tormentingly clear, I felt the walls close in, drowning in a haze of dread. "What do you mean? What's happening?" Then everything went silent, and just as fast, the door slammed shut. A lock clicked into place, sealing us inside with the cataclysm brewing outside. "Clara!" I gasped, fear clawing at my throat. I could see it now, the hint of dread painted across her face. Whatever had been unleashed in this place was coming for us. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't just stuck in a nightmare. I had stepped into something I couldn't fully understand. The question now loomed larger than ever. How do I escape when the danger was already upon us? I took a step back, my pulse racing as I watched Aunt Clara's eyes dart towards the door. "What are they?" I breathed, my stomach twisting in tight knots. "They should be looking for the others. We have to be quiet," she whispered urgently. "They won't rest until they find you." The weight of her words sank in. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the sound of heavy footsteps resumed outside, pacing like a predator. Clara pressed her finger to her lips, urging me to remain silent. The rustling and murmurs became louder, and I could feel the walls vibrating with tension. Just then I spotted something in the corner of the room. A tall metal cabinet, its doors slightly ajar. The urge to hide behind it threatened to overpower me, but we were locked in here, and running wouldn't help. "They think I'm in the building," Clara said quietly, her voice strained. "You need to stay put while I buy us some time." "No, I won't abandon you," I shouted, my fear overwhelming any thought of caution. "Stay close, Jamie." She gripped my arm, her eyes wide. "You have to trust me or we won't make it out of here." At that moment the lights flickered again, dimming to a dull hum before plunging us into shadows once more. "What is happening?" I asked, panic creeping up my throat like vines. "I don't know, something has changed. Just keep quiet." The heaviness in the air grew thicker, and I felt something shift, a presence pushing against the walls. I pressed my palms against the cool surface. I needed answers, but any questions I had vanished as a bone-chilling shriek echoed from just beyond the door, a sound that clawed at my insides and sent me stumbling backward. "What was that?" I gasped, my breath catching. Clara peered through the small window on the door, her face pale. "We have to act fast. They're coming." In the cramped space, every little noise felt amplified. I could hear my heart pounding, matching the rhythm of the chaos outside. Clara turned back toward me, determination etched in her features. "I know another way out. We'll go through the supply closet if we can get there." The thought of running made my stomach churn. "How do you know we can trust it?" I whispered. "Because it's all we have," she replied. "Now be quiet and follow my lead." Just as she turned toward the door, we both heard it, a voice low and taunting echoing from the hallway, confident and menacing. "You can't hide from us, Jamie." My breath hitched, and Clara's expression froze. The realization twisted in my gut like a knife. They knew my name. Who are they?" I stammered, fear constricting my throat. But before she could respond, there was another powerful thud against the door. The lock rattled as if something outside was trying to break through. "Now!" Clara shouted. Without thinking, I followed her as she moved toward the cabinet. But my legs felt like lead, planted in place as despair settled over me like a heavy blanket. That's when I saw it, a crack on the floor leading to a darkened space beneath the cabinet. A way out. "Clara!" I exclaimed, feeling a flicker of hope ignite in my chest. "Over here!" But as I leaned down to reach for it, the door buckled and splintered, and I heard that voice again. Closer now, full of menace. "Jamie, come out, and it's time." My heart raced as I felt the pull of the shadows in the room. I had to decide. Would I take the chance and slip through the crack? Or would I stay and face whatever waited on the other side? In that moment, I made the choice. I couldn't stay there, not with that voice lingering like a ghost in the air. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the cold floor biting into my skin. The crack was small, a tight squeeze, but I had no time to hesitate. "Clara, go," I urged, trying to shove my body through. My heart hammered against the walls of my chest as I wriggled into the darkness. It was cramped and musty, the air heavy with the smell of forgotten things. I heard Clara breathing behind me, her hand gripping my shoulder as I pushed further into the narrow space. Suddenly, the door burst open. Laughter echoed through the room, a sound filled with malice and certainty. "She's close. We can feel her." I froze, the noises from outside freezing me in place. The walls around us felt almost alive, vibrating with the chilling ambiance from the voices that taunted me. I could barely breathe in the small space, the darkness pressing in on me. "Keep going," Clara urged, shoving me forward. I pushed harder against the tight confines of the crawl space, but it held a terrifying sense of unfamiliarity. I could hear Clara's panicked whispers behind me, but the world outside was worse. "Stop hiding! We just want to play!" The voice rang out again, my skin prickled. Play. They wanted to play, with me. I crawled faster, my fingers trembling against the rough surface of the floor. For the first time, I felt the cold bite of anxiety crawl up my spine. Clara was getting further behind me, her grunts of effort echoing in the cramped tunnel. "Stay close," I called, my voice strained. Just as I felt a sob rise in my throat, I spotted a faint glimmer of light ahead. It flickered like a beacon of hope, telling me there was an end to this suffocating darkness. I focused everything on reaching it. But then, the laughter grew louder, almost deafening. "You're not going anywhere," they shouted. From behind, I felt a creeping sensation, a chill that slid behind me like ghostly fingers. I shivered, pressing myself harder into the narrow opening. "Clara, hurry!" In a sudden rush, I could see the opening widen. Light spilled onto my face, warm and welcoming. I reached for it with desperation. Then, I heard something else, a low rumble. A voice distinctly different from the others, almost soothing. "You must escape, Jamie, before it's too late." I paused briefly, torn. Who was this voice? Was it warning me, or was it part of the game they played? And then I heard the heavy footsteps again, thundering down the hallway. Clara was right behind me, her fingers catching on the edge of my shirt as she clawed her way forward. "Now!" she shouted. And with a final scuffle, we slipped through the gap and tumbled into a large, deserted room. I gasped, blinking against the sudden brightness. Everything looked different now, clean, sterile, and eerily quiet. My pulse raced as I scrambled to my feet, searching for doors or windows, anything that could lead us back to safety. But even as I looked around, I felt that familiar dread creeping back. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It felt like the calm before a storm. And then, I heard it again. "Come back to us, Jamie." I turned to Clara, who was scanning the room with wide eyes. "What was that?" I whispered, panic flooding my voice. "I don't know," she replied, stepping closer, "but we need to keep moving." But just as she moved to lead me toward a door on the far wall, the lights flickered above us, plunging us into darkness. A momentary black that was suddenly filled with the hiss of whispers. "Come back," they teased. In the silence that followed, dread washed over me. I realized that whatever was chasing us didn't just want to play, it wanted me. And now it had narrowed in, hovering on the edge of our reality, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I darted to the side, my breaths rapid and shallow as I glanced around the room for an exit. The air felt thick with anticipation, as if every shadow held its breath, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I could hear the whispers rising again, a cacophony of voices echoing through the emptiness. "Come back, we're waiting." "Clara, we need to go," I shouted, urgency lacing my voice. I knew we couldn't linger any longer. The feeling of being hunted pressed down on me like a physical weight. Clara nodded, her gaze scanning the room before settling on a set of double doors at the far end. As we dashed toward the exit, the echo of footsteps began to chase us, a relentless reminder that we were not alone. The whispers morphed into shouts, each one vying for my attention. "Help us! Jamie, help us!" The overwhelming noise threatened to crush me. "Don't listen to them!" Clara shouted, her eyes wide with fear. "Focus on getting out!" We reached the door, and Clara pushed it open. Light spilled into the hallway, illuminating our path like a lifeline. Just as we stepped into the corridor, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming dark shapes behind us. I wanted to glance back, to see what might still be pursuing us, but a guttural growl echoed softly, chilling me to the bone. We sprinted down the hall, powered by sheer adrenaline. I caught brief glimpses of rooms lining the corridor, patient rooms, storage areas, yet the whispers lurked in every corner, making it impossible to shake the feeling that we were being watched. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, creating a strobe effect that sent shivers racing down my spine. "Where are we going?" I panted, barely able to keep pace with Clara's long strides. "The stairs," she replied, glancing back nervously. "We can't get in the elevator, they'll be waiting for us." I spurred myself on, digging deep into reserves I didn't know I had. We reached the staircase, its metal handrail cold and unforgiving under my fingers. Clara led the way, each footstep resonating loudly against the barren walls. But the sounds behind us only grew louder, more frenzied, as if they were aware we were escaping. "Jamie!" Clara's voice broke through my fearful thoughts. "Keep going, we're almost there." The shadows seemed to creep up behind us, brushing against my ankles like fingers, and I felt a swell of panic threatening to spill over. I stumbled, nearly losing my footing, but Clara grabbed my arm, urging me onward. We burst through a door at the bottom of the stairwell that led us outside. The frigid night air wrapped around us, a strange contrast to the oppressive atmosphere we'd escaped. I paused for just a moment, taking in the starry sky, a sight I thought I might never see again. "Where's the car?" Clara asked, scanning the lot frantically. "It's over here," I exclaimed, barely remembering in my haze of shock. I led the way, fumbling to unlock the doors as the weight of everything settled upon me. Just as I slammed my car door shut, the echoes of the hospital tightened around my chest again, shadows reaching out beyond the pavement, desperate to haul me back. "We can't let them take us back." Clara's voice was urgent, and I could see terror etched across her face. "I know." I swiveled the key in the ignition, pumping the gas as I peered into the rearview mirror. But what about the others? What about the ones still trapped? The question slipped from my mouth unbidden. It felt heavy as lead in the silence. As I sped away, the outline of the hospital in the windows shrank into the night, and the whispers faded into a distant echo. But the dread lingered, twisting in my gut like a burden I couldn't shake. "Do you think it's over?" I asked, glancing sideways at Clara. Her expression bled uncertainty. "I don't know," she sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we can't forget them. Not now. They still need our help." With that, an uneasy silence settled in the car. I turned onto the main road, the lights from the hospital disappearing behind me. I wrestled with what I had witnessed, the maddening calls of the patients ringing in my ear. The remnants of something I couldn't quite let go gnawed at me. I moved to a different city a few weeks later, trying to escape the darkness that clung to me. But even now, in quiet moments alone, I still hear the echoes of their whispers. Sometimes I still see the chilling shadows dance at the corners of my vision, waiting for the chance to be realized. I guess I'll never know if those experiences were real or just figments of exhaustion. But the memory remains, my heart heavy with unresolved questions, and the lingering emotional pull of lives unfinished. Perhaps in the end I had escaped the building, but I hadn't escaped the burden of their cries. No matter how hard I try to forget, I know a piece of me remains chained to that hospital. I can only hope that one day I'll find a way to help them all, and perhaps somehow find a way to heal myself too.